Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, today we're going deep into the heart of a complex situation. Russia's aggression towards Ukraine.
Right.
You've shared some fascinating and, frankly, unsettling sources with us.
Yeah.
Including insights from a former high-ranking FSB official who fled to the U.S.
Oh, wow.
It's heavy stuff. So think of this deep dive as your crash course.
Okay.
Cutting through the noise to help you understand the how and why behind the headlines.
Exactly. We're going beyond the typical news cycle here.
Right.
To explore the strategies Russia has used to exert its influence,
Yeah.
the tactics they've employed, and why this goes far beyond a simple territorial dispute.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Sure.
Our source uses a powerful analogy. They say Russia is operating like a mafia,
Okay.
not a typical nation state. What exactly do they mean by that?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the source breaks down this idea.
Okay.
They argue that Russia leverages power, deception, and even violence to achieve its goals, much like an organized crime syndicate.
Wow.
It's not about diplomacy or international cooperation.
Right.
It's about brute force and manipulation.
So they're not playing by the usual rules of global politics.
Right, and they highlight specific examples of this mafia-like behavior,
Okay.
starting with the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine.
Wait, the church? How is that part of this?
Our source claims that many priests are either former FSB agents themselves
Oh, wow.
or have been coerced into collaborating with the Russian government. It becomes this network for spreading pro-Kremlin propaganda,
Okay.
almost creating a loyal base of influence within Ukraine.
Wow. So it's not just about religion.
Right.
It's about control and influence.
Exactly.
What else did this source point to?
Well, they also discuss the creation of these seemingly grassroots pro-Russian NGOs in Ukraine.
Okay.
On the surface, they look like local organizations, but they're allegedly funded and controlled by Russia.
So it's a way to manipulate public opinion from within.
Precisely. These NGOs push pro-Russian narratives and try to destabilize Ukraine's democratic processes, ultimately undermining the country's sovereignty. It's like a playbook for infiltrating and manipulating a nation from the inside out.
And this source goes on to talk about something even more blatant.
Yes.
The bribery of Ukrainian politicians.
Yes. They describe a system of straight-up corruption.
Wow.
Where Russia uses its financial and political influence to encourage the formation of pro-Russian political parties within Ukraine.
Who's basically trying to buy their way into power.
Yeah, the goal is to disrupt the nation's move towards democracy and European integration.
It's all starting to feel very calculated and sinister.
Yeah.
Almost like they're laying the groundwork for something bigger.
That's exactly what's so unsettling.
Right.
And this is where what happened in Crimea and eastern Ukraine back in 2014 comes in.
Right. These events were often portrayed in the media as local uprisings, but our source claims they were anything but.
You've hit a crucial point there. The source argues that Russia deliberately framed these events as local conflicts to mask their true intentions, to reassert control over Ukrainian territories.
So it was all a carefully orchestrated facade.
According to the source, yes.
Oh.
They say Russia was actively orchestrating instability within Ukraine, just waiting for the opportune moment to make their move and seize those territories.
Okay.
They even provide chilling details about how this was all planned and executed.
This is some seriously heavy stuff.
It is.
It sounds like they were setting the stage for a much larger power play.
Right. And what happened next, according to the source, is even more disturbing.
Okay.
They claim that when Ukraine was finally in a position to reclaim its internationally recognized territory, that's when Russia launched the full-scale invasion.
So not a defensive move, as Russia often claims.
Right.
It sounds like it was all part of a larger plan.
Exactly. They argue that Russia's attack was a calculated act of aggression, aimed at preventing Ukraine from achieving true independence and breaking free from Russian influence.
This is painting a very dark picture of Russia's intentions.
Yeah.
It seems like their actions in Ukraine go far beyond just reclaiming territory. They're about maintaining control and dominance.
Yeah, that's the heart of it.
Right.
This source is essentially saying, don't believe the propaganda.
Okay.
Russia is acting like a mafia, using whatever means necessary to achieve its goals and maintain its grip on the region.
Okay, but this raises an interesting question.
Yeah.
If Russia's so focused on preventing nations from breaking free from their sphere of influence, why haven't they reacted to Finland and Sweden joining NATO with the same level of aggression.
This is where the source's mafia analogy becomes really insightful.
Yeah.
They suggest that Russia reserves its aggression for nations it sees as a direct threat to its ambitions, particularly those like Ukraine that are actively seeking to move away from Russian influence and align themselves with the West.
So it's not about NATO expansion in general.
Right.
It's about controlling Ukraine specifically.
Right.
Because they see Ukraine's aspirations as a direct challenge to their regional power.
That seems to be the implication.
Right.
Russia wants to keep Ukraine firmly within its sphere of influence.
Okay.
And they're willing to use extreme measures to make that happen.
Yeah.
It's a chilling thought.
It is.
But this source's perspective helps us understand the deeper motivations behind Russia's actions.
It certainly does. It seems like what's happening in Ukraine is about much more than just territory.
Yeah.
It's about power control and Russia's determination to maintain its dominance in the region, even if it means using underhanded tactics and violence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just about physical force and political maneuvering.
Right.
The source also talks about something called information warfare.
Right. That was mentioned in some of the other sources, too.
Yeah.
What exactly is information warfare?
Right.
It sounds intense.
It essentially boils down to manipulating and controlling people's minds.
Okay.
This source argues that Russia has become incredibly sophisticated at using disinformation campaigns to shape the narrative and influence public opinion.
Wow.
Both inside and outside of Russia.
So it's like propaganda on steroids.
Yeah.
Using misinformation to control how people think.
You could say that.
Okay.
They're using everything from traditional media outlets to social media platforms to spread false information, so confusion, and even create divisions within society.
Wow.
It's a way to undermine trust in institutions and make people question their own realities.
And the goal is to, what are they hoping to achieve with all this?
The source suggests it's ultimately about weakening the resolve of democratic nations, making them question their own values and ultimately undermining their ability to effectively counter Russia's aggressive actions.
So it's like a virtual battlefield where they're trying to win hearts and minds.
Yeah.
Instead of just conquering territory, they're trying to conquer the narrative.
That's a great way to put it. And it's something that's incredibly difficult to combat.
Right.
Because it's often subtle and insidious.
Yeah.
It plays on our existing biases and fears, making it easier to be misled, especially in the age of social media where information spreads like wildfire.
This source is really painting a chilling picture of how Russia operates.
It is.
It's not just about tanks and troops. It's about using information as a weapon to influence and control.
Exactly. It's a form of warfare that's often invisible,
Right.
but no less impactful.
Yeah.
And in the wrong hands, it can be incredibly effective at manipulating public opinion and achieving strategic goals.
So what can be done about it?
Right.
How do we even begin to fight back against this kind of information warfare?
Yeah.
It feels like an overwhelming problem.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Part of it comes down to education.
Okay.
Helping people become more critical consumers of information.
So teaching people how to think for themselves.
Yes. We need to teach people how to identify fake news and propaganda, how to verify sources, and how to think critically about the information they're being bombarded with every day.
So it's about empowering individuals to be more discerning and to really think for themselves.
You got it.
Right.
We can't rely solely on governments or tech companies to solve this problem for us.
Yeah.
Each of us has a responsibility to be more vigilant.
Okay.
And to really question what we see and hear, especially online.
That makes sense, but it also sounds like a pretty daunting task.
It is.
Given how pervasive disinformation has become.
Right.
It's everywhere.
It is, but it's a fight we can't afford to lose.
Right.
If we allow Russia, or any other bad actor for that matter, to control the narrative, then they've already won half the battle.
This is definitely some heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Our sources really helped to shine a light on the darker side of Russia's tactics, the things we don't always see in the headlines.
Right. It's a lot to process.
Right. They're arguing that Russia is operating on multiple levels.
Okay.
Using a combination of brute force political manipulation and this information warfare to achieve its goals.
Right.
And they're doing it with a level of sophistication and ruthlessness that's often underestimated.
Okay, but if Russia is so powerful and manipulative, why hasn't there been more pushback?
Right.
Why haven't they faced stronger consequences for their actions in Ukraine?
Well, there have been sanctions and condemnations from the international community.
Right.
But this source argues that it hasn't been enough.
Okay.
They believe that Russia has been allowed to get away with too much for too long, and that's emboldened them to continue their aggressive behavior.
So why is that?
Right.
Why hasn't the world taken more decisive action?
The source suggests that the world has been too willing to appease Russia,
Okay.
to believe their propaganda, and to underestimate their willingness to use force.
So basically just wishful thinking.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah. They argue that for a long time, many countries were hesitant to challenge Russia directly, either out of fear of escalation or because they were hoping to maintain economic ties.
So a failure to recognize the true nature of the threat.
Exactly. And the source is urging the world to wake up and see Russia for what they believe it to be.
Right.
A dangerous and unpredictable force that needs to be confronted, not appeased.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
But it also feels incredibly important.
Yes.
If we want to effectively counter Russia's actions in Ukraine and prevent further aggression, we need to understand the full scope of their tactics and the motivations behind them.
Absolutely. The source's perspective is a call to action.
Right.
It's a plea for the world to stand up to Russia and defend the values of democracy and freedom that they believe are under attack.
This deep dive is really giving us a lot to think about.
It is.
It's a reminder that the situation in Ukraine is far more complex than it often appears on the surface. And it's certainly made me question a lot of the narratives I've heard about the conflict.
You're right, and it's a reminder that we all need to be vigilant, informed, and engaged if we want to make a difference. This isn't just about Ukraine, it's about the future of global security and the fight against authoritarianism.
Powerful words. It sounds like the stakes are incredibly high.
They are.
This conversation is far from over.
Right.
So stick with us as we continue to unpack these sources and explore the complexities of Russia's aggression towards Ukraine. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from Russia's mafia-like tactics to their sophisticated use of information warfare. But where does this all leave us? What's the takeaway for you listening right now?
I think if we connect this to the bigger picture, this source leaves us with a stark warning. They believe that Russia's aggression towards Ukraine isn't an isolated incident, but rather a symptom of a much larger problem. Russia's ambition to expand its influence and control, even if it means undermining the sovereignty of other nations.
So this isn't just about Ukraine's fate. It's about the future of global security and the stability of democratic nations everywhere.
Exactly.
It's a pretty unsettling thought.
It is. And the source is urging the world to recognize the gravity of the situation. And take decisive action to counter Russia's aggression. They argue that continued appeasement will only embolden Russia and lead to further instability on the world stage.
What kind of action are they talking about specifically? What do they propose the world should do?
They don't lay out concrete steps, but they emphasize the need for a united and resolute response from the international community. That could include things like stronger sanctions, increased military and financial support for Ukraine, and a clear message that Russia's actions will not be tolerated. It's about drawing a line in the sand.
It sounds like they're calling for a fundamental shift in how the world deals with Russia, moving away from appeasement and towards a more assertive and unified stance.
Yes. They're essentially saying that the old ways of doing things are no longer effective. Russia has demonstrated a willingness to violate international norms and use brute force to achieve its objectives. And the world needs to adapt to this new reality if we want to prevent future conflicts.
This all feels very heavy and complex.
It is.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of it all. So I have to ask, what can ordinary people do? Does our individual action even matter in the face of such a large-scale geopolitical struggle?
That's a question a lot of people are grappling with. And while it's true that individuals might feel powerless in the face of these global events, the source reminds us that collective action can make a difference.
So you're saying there's still hope? That even small actions can have an impact?
Absolutely. Every voice that speaks out against aggression, every act of solidarity with those affected by conflict, every effort to counter disinformation, these things all chip away at the foundation of authoritarianism and strengthen the forces of democracy and freedom
So it's about staying informed,
Yes.
speaking out against injustice, supporting humanitarian efforts, and holding our leaders accountable.
Exactly. Those are all ways we can contribute to positive change.
Right.
Even if it feels like a drop in the ocean.
Right.
Remember, oceans are made of drops.
This has been an incredibly insightful, albeit sobering deep dive.
Yeah.
It's clear that Russia's aggression towards Ukraine is a complex issue with far-reaching implications for all of us.
Indeed. And while this source provides a valuable perspective,
Right.
it's crucial to continue seeking out diverse viewpoints and engaging in critical thinking as we navigate this challenging landscape.
Okay.
Don't just take our word for it. Keep digging and exploring these issues.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
We can't just sit back and watch. We need to stay engaged, informed, and committed to supporting those fighting for their freedom in a more just world.
Absolutely.
And we need to be aware of the tactics being used to manipulate and control us, both online and in the real world.
Well said. And as we conclude this deep dive, we leave you with a thought. How can each of us contribute to a world where such blatant aggression is no longer tolerated? Let this question guide your actions and shape your understanding of the events unfolding around us.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
It's been a challenging but crucial conversation.
It has.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.